It begins in the summer of 1946. In New Haven, Connecticut, George Walker Bush was born into one of America's most politically connected families. His father, George H.W. Bush, would one day become the 41st President of the United States. His grandfather, Prescott Bush, had already served in the U.S. Senate. From the start, George W. Bush was surrounded by politics, privilege, and expectation. But his early life wasn't all about politics. Growing up in Midland and Houston, Texas, he developed the swagger and folksy charm that would later become his trademark. He went to Yale University, joined the secretive Skull and Bones Society, and earned a reputation more for partying than academics. After college, he served as a pilot in the Texas Air National Guard during the Vietnam War era, though critics would later question the nature of his service. The 1970s and early 80s were a mix of business ventures and personal struggles. Bush tried his hand at the Texas oil business with mixed success. He battled and eventually overcame a drinking problem. In 1977, he married Laura Welch, a former librarian and teacher whose steady personality balanced his restless energy. By the late 80s, politics began to call. Bush worked on his father's successful 1988 presidential campaign and later became managing general partner of the Texas Rangers baseball team, a move that gave him public visibility and sharpened his leadership image. In 1994, George W. Bush ran for governor of Texas. His campaign leaned heavily on compassionate conservatism, a mix of traditional Republican values and promises to improve education and work across party lines. He defeated incumbent Ann Richards and became a popular two-term governor. His political star was rising fast. By 2000, Bush had set his sights on the presidency. The race against Democrat Al Gore was one of the closest and most controversial in U.S. history. The outcome came down to Florida, where recounts, lawsuits, and a Supreme Court decision ultimately handed Bush the victory. He entered the White House under a cloud of dispute, with the nation deeply divided. The first months of his presidency were relatively uneventful. Then came September 11, 2001. On that clear Tuesday morning, terrorists hijacked 4 planes, crashing 2 into the Twin Towers in New York City, 1 into the Pentagon, and 1 into a Pennsylvania field. Nearly 3,000 people were killed. Bush's presidency, and America itself, would never be the same. In the hours after the attacks, Bush addressed the nation, promising justice. Soon came the War on Terror. U.S. forces invaded Afghanistan to topple the Taliban, accused of harboring al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden. In 2003, Bush made the controversial decision to invade Iraq, citing weapons of mass destruction that were never found. The war toppled Saddam Hussein but dragged on for years, costing thousands of American and Iraqi lives and billions of dollars. At home, Bush pushed through major domestic policies like the No Child Left Behind Act, aiming to reform education. But his approval ratings began to slip as the Iraq War grew unpopular and casualties mounted. Then in August 2005 came one of the most defining and damaging moments of his presidency, Hurricane Katrina. Katrina slammed into the Gulf Coast as a Category 3 storm, devastating New Orleans and parts of Louisiana and Mississippi. Entire neighborhoods were obliterated. And then came the flooding. Official accounts said the levees failed under the immense pressure of storm surge. But in New Orleans, many residents told a different story, that they heard explosions before the water rushed in, igniting deep suspicion about what really happened. For a city with a long history of mistrust toward the government, those accounts only added to the pain and anger. What no one disputes is the horror that followed. 80% of New Orleans was submerged. Tens of thousands of people, most of them poor, were stranded for days without food, clean water, or medical care. Families were trapped on rooftops, waving makeshift flags for help. The Superdome, meant to be a refuge, descended into chaos. The heat was unbearable, the stench overwhelming. The federal response was slow, disorganized, and to many, callous. When Bush praised FEMA Director Michael Brown with the now infamous words, "Brownie, you're doing a heck of a job," it rang bitterly in the ears of those still waiting for rescue. Across the country, and especially in Black America, Katrina came to symbolize a harsh truth, that when disaster strikes, the most vulnerable can be left behind. Bush's approval ratings plummeted. For many Americans, Katrina wasn't just a natural disaster, it was a moral one, exposing racial and economic divides that the nation had long tried to ignore. The final years of Bush's presidency brought more challenges. In 2008, the U.S. was plunged into the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. Banks collapsed, markets tanked, and millions lost jobs and homes. The crisis overshadowed nearly everything else. By the time Bush left office in January 2009, his approval ratings were among the lowest in modern history. Supporters praised his steadfastness after September 11th and his efforts to protect the country from further terrorist attacks. Critics pointed to the Iraq War, Katrina, and the economic collapse as defining failures. In the years since leaving the White House, Bush has largely stayed out of partisan politics. He's taken up painting, written books, and worked on veteran-focused humanitarian causes. His public image has softened somewhat, but the debates over his presidency remain as sharp as ever. George W. Bush's legacy is a tapestry of triumphs, tragedies, and controversies. A reminder that the Oval Office is a place where history's weight can lift a leader or crush him.